Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Wilmington Board of Selectmen meeting, March 30th, 2020. It's 7 p.m. If you will just bear with me, I want to read off how we arrived here. Pursuant to Governor Baker's March 12th, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law, Chapter 30A, subsection 18, and the Governor's March 15, 2020 order imposing strict limitations on the number of people that may gather in one place, members of the public who wish to watch and listen to the meeting may do so in the following manner. We're on WCTV Channel 9, Comcast Xfinity, Channel 37 on Verizon Fios. You can live stream us on WCTV.org. This meeting of the Wilmington Board of Selectmen is being conducted via remote participation. No in-person attendance of the members of the public will be permitted, but every effort will be made to ensure that the public can adequately access meetings in real time via these technological. Members of the public who would like to listen to this meeting while in progress may also do so via telephone, dialing 1-646-558-8656 and entering the ID 785-350-874, and pressing pound and pound again. And I will repeat that later on. Members of the public attending this meeting virtually will be allowed to make comments if they wish during the portion of the meeting designated to public comment by following the steps previously noted by pressing *9 on their telephone keypad. This will notify the meeting host that the caller wishes to speak. All callers using this feature will be placed in a queue in order that they entered their prompt. In the event that, despite our best efforts, we are not able to provide real-time access, we will provide website as soon as possible. With that, this is our first ever remote meeting, so undoubtedly there will be some bumps in the road, but the town must continue. We will do our best. I will do the best I can to chair the meeting along with our town IT director, John O'Neill, acting as the Wizard of Oz of this meeting, helping us out with the technology. And we want to thank our friends at WCTV. We are live on television. I can see it in the background now. So I'll start off by doing the roll call for the members of the board. All votes will be taken by roll call and done so alphabetically. So I'll start with the roll call of attendance. Mr. Bendel, present. Mr. Kyra?
Present.
Mr. Eaton?
Present.
Mr. McCoy?
Present.
Mrs. O'Mahony?
Present.
All members are present, and we will be hearing from about 17 guests here tonight that we are expecting, in addition to the members of the public that will be joining us. So obviously we want to practice social distancing, and this is the best way we can have it. But one tradition we'd like to keep alive is the Pledge of Allegiance. If you please join me. I pledge allegiance to the flag
Flag.
Yeah.
the States of America and to the republic which it stands, one nation,
Under
under
God,
God,
indivisible,
indivisible, for liberty and justice for all.
very much. Keeping that alive. I'm coming to you live from my basement where the American flag is, so that my kids who are getting ready to go to bed hopefully won't disturb us too much. With that, we have the transmitting of Treasury warrants 39 and 39A, again by roll call vote. Mr. Bendel? Yes. Kyra?
Yes.
Mr. Eaton?
Yes.
McCoy?
Yes.
Mrs. O'Mahony?
yes.
Unanimous for the Treasury warrants. We have 2 sets of minutes to prove. We'll take them up individually, again by roll call vote. First, February 24th meeting of 2020. Is there a motion first?
Selectman Eaton makes a motion.
Selectman O'Mahony seconds it.
Motion's been made and seconded. Mr. Bendel, yes. Mr. Kyra?
Yes.
Mr. Eaton?
Yes.
Mr. McCoy?
Yes.
Mrs. O'Mahony?
Yes.
It's unanimous. Thank you. And for March 9th, 2020. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Boy makes the motion.
And we have a motion from Mr. McCoy. Is it seconded by Mr. Kyra?
Yeah, seconded by Mr. Kyrie. Yep.
Thank you. I'll roll call again. Bendel, yes. Mr. Kyra,
yes,
Mr. Eaton,
Yes.
Mr. McCoy,
Yes.
Mrs. O'Mahony.
Yes.
It is unanimous, Bev. Thank you. I should note that we are joined by our town manager, Mr. Hull, who you'll be hearing from shortly, and also our administrative assistant, Beverly Dalton, is on the line. We'll have other guests throughout the evening, who I will introduce as they come on. And again, we will have time for public comment if you'd like to join us by phone. We will list the number again. I think it's being viewed on the screen. With that, we'll start our first appointment. I want to welcome always the best dressed person in the room, is Attorney Robert Peterson Jr., town moderator, and also our town clerk is here, Christina Conway, and we are discussing the postponement of the annual town election, and recess and continuation of the annual town meeting. Good evening to you both.
Evening, Mr. Bendel.
Mr. Moderator, would you like to start this discussion?
Yeah, sure. First of all, I want to thank you for letting me know I should wear a suit today. It's likewise, you told me you would be doing the same. So I really appreciate that. Yeah, so I was asked to come on by the via our conversation with the chair, Mr. Bendel. We've had an open dialogue between myself, Mr. Bendel, town manager, town council, as well as our town clerk, planning director, other department heads, our director of health. And we have been in discussions. I believe these discussions relative to our annual town meeting started on the 13th, which was Friday, March 13th, I believe, as to how we were going to handle the town meeting situation relative to the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic. It was important for us, and I commend the town manager in doing so, to get in front of this, to be proactive instead of reactive in our approach to letting the citizens know where we stood with town meeting, and not only where we stood with town meeting, where we stood with town meeting and how that was going to have an effect on the joint committee hearings with the finance committee and the planning board. So via our conversations, it was decided that obviously under the CDC guidelines and the orders issued by the governor, that we were going to be unable to hold our joint meeting on that Tuesday, the 17th. So it was further discussed that the moderator was going to exercise his powers under Chapter 39, Section 10A of our Massachusetts General Laws to delay the town meeting to a date where he felt it would be, or at least we hope that we'll be able to have a meeting, which under 10A we have extended up to 30 days. So we took that action, and we took that action on Tuesday, or we made the decision on Tuesday the 17th, definitively, so we could put out into the public realm a date certain for the continuance of the joint committee hearings, which were supposed to be scheduled that evening. So the folks who were planning to go there had some sort of date that they could look forward to or put in their calendar to when that was being continued, and then they could have that continued meeting in correlation with the continued town meeting. Now, Mr. Chair, I believe, and I discussed it with the town manager, we wanted to talk about how we're handling the warrant. Is that how you want me to, the next thing you want me to address?
Yes, sir. And then I'll go to the town clerk and when you're finished.
Okay. So we had a further conversation relative to how the meeting would be continued and how that would have an effect on our town warrant. As you know, our elections are on our annual town meeting warrant. So it was decided, again, through conversations with myself, public safety officials, town manager, town clerk, you, finance committee, the chair of the finance committee, that we would decouple or bifurcate our town warrant. What that essentially means is we're going to have our annual town meeting warrant for the articles is going to be posted, and I'll let our town clerk get into that about the technicalities around that posting. So to just to quell any concern, if you see it, it will be posted as if we're proceeding with the annual town meeting on May 2nd. However, the town moderator's determination that the meeting is going to be postponed on 10A will be effective as of 10:30 a.m. on the 2nd, which will push us out to May 30th. So that will post, and then we were going to have, when we decouple that warrant, under the governor's new legislation, which gives a little leeway in the municipal elections, I'll let the town clerk talk about how that is going to, how we're going to go about that posting of that warrant. But before we kick it over to the town clerk, I just wanted to get this out there. And I know he can't be with us here tonight, but we've had, I would say, exceptional legal guidance from Attorney Rich of KP Law. He's been there. He's answered every question, every email. He's been there every step of the way for us. And I can tell you wholeheartedly that what we're dealing with is a novel situation. It's uncharted. And what we're doing, we're taking the steps to make sure that the folks in Wilmington understand where we are in our town meeting process and where we're going to go. And they will continue to be, continue to be proactive instead of reactive, or try to be as proactive as possible in getting these meeting dates, times, and locations out, so everyone keep that on their calendar to make sure they're going to be available. But we also, we might plan for, or we might anticipate there might be a reasonable or foreseeable further delay in the town meeting. But again, if that comes to fruition, we'll let everybody know.
Thank you very much. I want to go to our town clerk, Ms. Conway.
Good evening. So what we've decided is on April 9th, I've been in touch with the constable, and he's going to post the warrant as it was signed by you folks on March 9th. And along with that will be an order, which, presuming that you take the vote tonight, which I expect you to take, to postpone the election of April 25th. That will also be posted at the same time, along with an explanation in your vote that we're actually going to be separating the warrant, the election warrant, out from the town meeting warrant. We aren't going to post a new warrant until we have a new date, and we aren't required to set a date right at the time that you actually postpone the election, which at this point makes sense because we really don't know when we should even think about having the election. So the warrant will be posted on April 9th. It will have a notice posted with it saying that we're bifurcating the warrant between the election and the town meeting, and it will contain your order, which basically is going to say that you're postponing the election and that you're separating the warrant. Will also contain a copy of Mr. Peterson's decision regarding the postponement of the town meeting to May 30th.
Thank you very much. Before I go to the members who might have questions or comments, I want to turn it over to our town manager, Mr. Hull, who maybe you can describe what 2 votes you may be looking for from the board tonight, so that they know what they might be voting on.
Yes, so essentially there are 2 votes that the board is asked to consider. The first in brief, and I have a prepared motion I can provide if as a board decides to go this route. First being to postpone the election to a date to be determined. And then the second motion would be to approve the May 2nd annual town meeting warrant be posted with the expectation that, as the clerk noted, a notation or a document describing the change in the election date would be appended to the warrant itself. So as you know, when the board approved the warrant on March 9th, there was one warrant that included both the election and the business portion of the meeting. So that would remain the same with this appended notice advising the public that the election will be, the date will be determined at a date later.
Great. Thank you very much. I'd like to go to the members. Again, I'll go alphabetically. That's okay. Mr. Kyra, do you have any questions or comments?
The timeline for notification of the election to give the residents, is it 20 days, 10 days, 30 days?
So it would be 20, you have to set the election date no fewer than 20 days prior to what the date is going to be. So at least 20 days before the actual election will be held, you need, the selectmen need to take their vote. So you can take it 30 days in advance, you can take it as far in advance as possible. but it can't be closer than 20 days to the election. At that point, we will, we haven't really decided what courses of action we'll take to publicize it. Certainly we'll do as much as we can. We'll post the warrant. We'll probably do perhaps some newspaper advertising, whatever we feel we need to do in order to make sure that people understand when the election is. These are untested waters, so we know that we need to sort of do as much advertising and informationing as possible. Put it on the website, put it on WCTV, Wilmington Community Television. Perhaps even ask them if they could give us some time to talk about it on WCTV. Whatever needs to be done in order to let people know, we will do.
And so we'll be splitting out the election from the warrant. And in regards to the town meeting, there's still the potential of that being moved out further as well, correct, into June?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Kevin, just to address that, that's a very real possibility. And Mark and I, Attorney Reach and I had gone back and forth on the logistics around that. And that they've been very helpful in considering the fact that they've been in touch with the Attorney General. And again, this is a novel area. It's never been approached before. So we've been trying to figure out the best way to do it. I believe that Town Council and I are at an understanding if we need to further delay town meeting, then we have the mechanism to do just that. And we'll be watching the CDC guidelines and the orders coming down from the governor's office to see the possibilities or the reality of having that on May 30th. And if we need to, we can further delay or push off town meeting until a time is safe when we can gather as a community.
And one last question, I would like the election to be before town meeting, but doing this would allow us to have the election after town meeting as well. Is that true?
We'll set the election date based on the best information we have possible. The one thing that has to happen under the legislation that was passed is that it has to be, as of right now, before June 30th. So that's kind of the drop dead date that we have to have the election. One thing that I didn't talk about was one of the provisions of the law that was passed, the emergency legislation that was passed, is they're enabling us to have early voting by mail election. It's not something it's just for this set of circumstances. So one of the things that we do intend to do is to very heavily reach out to the people even before we set an election date, saying you can have ballots will be ordered the week of the 8th when we return to work, and we'll have those ballots available to us the following week, and we can be mailing ballots out. People can do their voting by mail, send them in, and they still have to be processed on election day, whenever that is. But we believe that, if there is continued fear about people leaving their homes, about people congregating in any kind of crowds, they will just be able to do it all by mail, and that will keep everybody from having to be in a larger crowd area. So, technically, it could be any time. There isn't anything that talks about before or after the town meeting.
Yeah, and I guess what is unique about this year's election is that I believe there's no opposition.
None.
Other than what could be a write-in.
Right.
Right. Maybe there's an
Don't worry,
opportunity
no,
to get the election done sooner than later.
Well, I mean, that's going to be up to the CDC guidelines and the considerations that we have to have for being able to get election personnel, people have to be willing to come and work. People have to be safe when they come. So sooner rather than later, yes, but certainly in accordance with whatever the groundwork looks like out there and the guidelines that are set forth.
Yeah, of course. Thank you, Mr. Bindle.
Thank you. Before I go to Mr. Eaton, I want to acknowledge that we are joined by Attorney Jonathan Silverstein, Town Council, who's with us this evening. And if any members have any questions for him, he's here. I previously mentioned to the members before we started that Attorney Mark Rich was unable to attend because of a death in his family. So we certainly are thinking of him tonight and send him our condolences. but Attorney Silverstein is here if you need any questions. Mr. Eaton, you have questions or comments?
I do. Thank you, Mr. Bendel. I'm very appreciative, Ms. Conway, that voting by mail and early voting by mail is something that's going to be an option, but I certainly don't think that only voting by mail is going to be the way that we conduct this, right? So regardless of whether voting by mail is an option that is expanded from what we've normally done, we still will have, when it eventually happens, the voting in person at the regular locations, right?
We have to have an election. Yes, there will
Yeah.
absolutely be an election. There's no, but this
So-
enables people who have a fear of going out to be able to exercise their right to vote without putting themselves in any kind of danger.
Yes, I think that the point that I'm taking from that is it's unlikely that we would be having a town meeting where we'll have a couple hundred people in an auditorium at a time at a date that's drastically separated from a town election where we would have several hundred people going into polling locations and interacting with the election volunteers or the election workers as well. So my assumption, and please correct me if I'm wrong, is that those two dates will probably be pretty close to each other when they eventually happen, and it's we can't really say with any certainty as to when that would happen at this point.
True. I will have it as soon as we can. I'd certainly like to get it as quickly as we can. It's just that there's lead time that we need in order to get that done. And we right now just can't even begin to predict when that might be.
Okay. Is there, this might be a question for Attorney Silverstein or Mr. Hall. Do we have a required lead time for the joint Planning Board Finance Committee meeting?
There is a lead time in advance of the town meeting, yes. Not, as I recall in the bylaws, not a specific lead time in advance of the election.
Okay, so it's, I would imagine that the ordinary open meeting law timeline of it, 48 hours, but hopefully it will be more than that. As things start to improve and we start to approach normalcy, my guess is we'll probably be finding out in quick order when that joint meeting is going to happen, and then when the election and the town meeting are then scheduled for.
Well, again, just to be clear, the notice for the election has to happen at least 20 days in advance of the election.
Yeah, I'm not contradicting that at all. I'm saying that I'm imagining all three of those things, the joint meeting, the election, and the town meeting, will be getting new dates that are relatively certain around the same time at an indeterminate point in the future.
I would say that it's fair to say we would want to have both dates determined to the extent as soon as we can, so that as opposed to locking in one date without the other.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, if I could just jump in quickly. The legislation that authorizes the continuance of elections specifies that it's notwithstanding any charter provision or local bylaw to the contrary. So in my opinion, provisions with respect to timing of town meeting versus elections, and similarly with the joint public hearing of the Finance Committee and the Planning Board, I think the legislature recognized that these are exigent circumstances and these are unique times, and those provisions I would, in my opinion, not be binding, although, I certainly understand that the town would want to adhere to its normal process to the extent that is practicable.
Thank you. Mr. Eaton, any other comments or questions?
None for me.
Mr. McCoy, any comments or questions?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, no, whatever the pleasure of the other four members on the board, whatever decision you decide to make for the election, I have no problem with that. I'd support that, given the circumstances. I know this is uncharted waters for all of us, and relative to the citizens of the town. So whatever the decision you four folks make, I have no problem with that. I'd support it, and just see how it goes. That's all we can do.
Thank you. Mrs. O'Mahony?
Sure. I mean, I guess being the only candidate officially on the ballot on this call tonight, this wasn't unexpected. I appreciate Rob and Tina, all that you and kind of your crew did to, you know, figure this out and continue to figure it out, because obviously there's no way to come to a definite decision on what can happen until we kind of see how long the stay at home is gonna be for all of us. So, you know, thanks for the update. Thanks for all your hard work and communicating with the state and making sure we're following the process. I was thinking when Kevin and Jonathan were kind of asking their questions, it's just interesting when we spent so much time with the bylaws committee talking about whether town meeting should come before or after the town election, that this year we might be testing out a different way anyway, just given kind of what we're doing. So it'll be fun to see how that works out. Maybe Selectman McCoy will be on the stage for one more town meeting, or change his mind and work some magic with a write-in campaign. So I look forward to seeing what happens between now and whenever the election
You can rest
happens.
assured.
But thank you for your hard work in this.
Rest assured, I won't
Well,
writing.
someone might.
All right, thank you. I'll just conclude by, before we call for a motion here on the two votes that I was looking for, I just want to thank Mr. Peterson, Tina, and Jonathan, and Jeff for your work on this and keeping everybody apprised of what's going on. Obviously, very fluid situation has been mentioned, and I know that you guys will do the very best you can to continue to keep residents abreast of what's going on. So with that, would anybody like to make a motion as was outlined by the town manager?
So if I could, let me just read into the record the motion that I would suggest. Again, this was in consultation with Attorney Mark Rich, to move that the Board of Selectmen, in light of the declared state of emergency in Massachusetts and in the United States necessitated by the spread of COVID-19, as well as the March 23 order of the governor closing non-essential businesses and recommending issuance of a stay-at-home advisory, as well as the closing of all schools through May 4, 2020, and consistent with the action of the state Senate and House to delay special state elections to fill vacancies and allowing towns to delay elections to an appropriate date prior to July 1, 2020, and further taking into account that information continues to develop about the transmission of novel coronavirus COVID-19, vote to postpone the date of the annual town election pursuant to Chapter 45 of the Acts of 2020, and further authorize the posting of a new election warrant once such date has been determined, no later than 20 days prior to the date of the postponed election.
This is Selectman Eaton, I'll make that motion.
Thank you.
Yeah. Selectman O'Mahony will second it.
Okay, the motion's been made and seconded. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, we'll call for the vote. Roll call alphabetically. Mr. Bendel, yes. Mr. Kyra,
Yes.
Mr. Eaton,
Yes.
Mr. McCoy,
Yes.
Mrs. O'Mahony.
Yes.
Unanimous on the first vote. Mr. Hull, the second motion.
The second motion would read as follows: move that the approved May 2nd, 2020 annual town meeting warrant be posted. And in light of the actions taken under vote 1, a notation be made on the approved warrant indicating that the annual town election has been postponed, and that reference be made to the town website for further information.
Is there a motion?
This is
I'll make that
Selectman Eaton.
motion.
Yep, I'll second. This is Selectman Eaton and I'll second.
The motion's been made by,
Sorry, I didn't.
seconded by Mr. Eaton. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, we'll call for the vote. Mr. Bendel, yes. Mr. Kyra,
Yes.
Mr. Eaton,
Yes.
Mr. McCoy,
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Mrs. O'Mahony.
Yes.
It is unanimous also. Thank you very much, folks. Mr. Moderator, Tina, thank you for joining.
Thank you, guys.
Take care, be safe.
Now, am I safe? Now, how we're working this. I can leave the meeting now. Zoom.
Same time in your household with a couple young ones, so you won't want to get back there.
I'm at my office. I don't think I'm going home for a little bit until bedtime's over.
Really in a row.
My wife's watching this. I'm dead. So
Yeah.
I appreciate.
This is on record.
I know. I appreciate you guys having me. Have a good night, everybody.
Yeah.
Good night.
Right.
No, Rob.
Okay, we will move to our second appointment, which is with Attorney Jonathan Silverstein. And it's regarding a presentation of development agreement with Princeton Properties. With us tonight, we have not only Jonathan Silverstein, obviously Town Manager Hull. We have Planning Director Valerie Gingrich is with us. It's my understanding Mr. Shaben is on the phone as well. So good evening to all of you. Mr. Hull, if you don't mind setting this conversation up for us, that'd be great. And we'll kick it over to Attorney Silverstein.
Yes, so just by way of introduction, the board will recall that Andrew Chabin and representatives from Princeton Property first discussed with the board a concept for an affordable housing apartment development at your September 23rd, 2019 meeting. At the time, the concept was a 120 unit development based upon discussions. The number was later revised to 108 units. There was a meeting again with the board and Andrew Chabin and his firm on January 13th, where there was some additional detail provided about the plan and a request that the board to support a limited local initiative program with the Department of Housing and Community Development to pursue this project. At that meeting, the board voted in the majority to endorse the LIP program, so-called LIP program, for the development of 108 units of affordable housing at a Princeton property. During the course of the time between January and present, there have been discussions between attorneys representing the town and Princeton, as well as staff from my office with regard to the terms and conditions for a development agreement. And I'm going to turn it over at this point to Attorney Silverstein to highlight the terms and conditions of that development agreement. The board will be asked this evening to essentially take two votes. The first being to authorize Chairman Bendel to execute the LIP application, which, as I mentioned, the board approved to agree to support at your January 13th meeting. And then the second vote would be to authorize execution of the development agreement. And with that, I'll turn it over to Attorney Silverstein.
Thank you, Mr. Hull. So as the town manager was indicating, the board previously voted to support this project. It's what's known as a local initiative project, or a friendly 40B, as it's colloquially known, subject to negotiation of an acceptable development agreement. We've spent the past couple of months negotiating that agreement, and the agreement is before you tonight for approval by the board. The board's previous vote set certain requirements for what the development agreement has to include, and this agreement does include those pieces. As previously voted, the agreement calls for a maximum of 108 units with 173 bedrooms. The units will include 20% permanently income restricted at 50% of the area median income. I can explain further what that means if the board has any questions about it, but essentially it's a higher level of affordability than other types of affordable units. And it includes a provision that the units have to remain as rental units. And the important factor there is that unlike home ownership projects, in rental projects, the town gets to count as towards its subsidized housing inventory all of the units in a rental project whereas in a homeownership project, only the actual restricted affordable units would count on the town's subsidized housing inventory. The project, the development agreement also has height restrictions and some other development restrictions with respect to open space and lot coverage. I want to be really clear. The purpose of a development agreement like this is not to be the primary regulatory document. That's going to be a comprehensive permit that has to be issued by the Zoning Board of Appeals after a full public hearing. So the ZBA will be setting the really specific development restrictions, but we did want to include some broad strokes development restrictions on this project that, include contractual protections for the town. And so the project has a 25% lot coverage and 40% open space requirement. The board also had voted that there be a contribution towards a potential fire station in this area of town, and the agreement provides for a $250,000 contribution towards that project over 10 years. And it also provides for a permanent deed restriction with respect to both the affordability and the requirement that it be a rental project. So those are some of the highlights. There's a lot more to it, of course. I know that the board probably has a full agenda. I'm happy to answer any questions that the board may have. As Ms. Gingrich may get into in a little while, at this point, the town is under 10%. The hope would be that if a comprehensive permit issues for this project, that would put the town back over the 10%, which would protect it from less friendly projects, which under the DHCD regulations could be as large as 300 units each. And I think that town staff is comfortable with the development proposal. The only other thing I'll note is that his project is subject to a MassWorks grant to fund improvements, both a sewer line, some road improvements, and culvert, repair of the failing culvert in this area. And the town's engineering and planning staff were deeply involved in negotiating those provisions of the agreement. And all of the costs of preparing that MassWorks grant and administering the MassWorks grant, if it's awarded, would be borne by Princeton. So with that, I'll...
Thank you. And Ms. Gingrich, I know you're on the line here. I want to give you a chance to chime in and perhaps to touch upon the fact that although I myself am very supportive of this project and hopefully it will go through, this project still has a long way to go, not only in our town, but at the state level. Perhaps you could touch upon those things for us.
Sure. So after the project is, they need an approval from DHCD, the Department of Housing and Community Development at the state. Once they get that letter of approval, they get to go to our local ZBA for a comprehensive permit. And they also need to go to our local Conservation Commission to get approval from them. So a lot more meetings and process to go.
Great. I understand that Mr. Shaben is on the phone, and I want to give him the opportunity to say hello. And if you want to add anything before we go to the members, thank you for holding, Mr. Shaben.
I really appreciate that, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. Under trying circumstances, I will say that I've been at this for 35 years or so, and I want to applaud Mr. Hull, Mr. Silverstein, Ms. Gingrich, and your town engineer. They have been cooperative. They have been available. They have been tough but fair. The development agreement, I think, covers exactly what Attorney Silverstein laid out to the board. We are happy to be taking the next step with the town. I think, as you rightly point out, Mr. Chairman, we have a long way to go before we sleep. but we're excited to hopefully see the board take the next step this evening. So thank you, Mr. Chairman, and if there are any questions, I stand ready to answer.
Great, thank you very much. And so with that, I'd like to turn to the board and see if there's any comments or question. Then we'll come back to Mr. Hull, because I know that it may be beneficial to everybody who's on the line to perhaps take the agenda out of order. And if there is a board so chooses to take up the two board to consider items regarding this issue, I'd be happy to entertain that. So with that, I will start with Mr. Kyra. Do you have a comment or question, sir?
No, I'm not at this time, Mr. Bendel. Well, maybe just one. I don't even know if it can be answered. It's regarding the MassWorks grant application, Mr. Shaven. Do you know how long, with the uncertainty of what's going on now, is that going to delay you?
Thank you for the question, Mr. Kyra. I do not believe so. Obviously, with the state in a state of emergency, anything is possible. However, these monies are for the fiscal year that will end June of 2021, and so I don't believe that that these are reallocatable monies, if that's the right phrase. We will seek our guidance after this evening's vote from the Commonwealth, but at present, we do not see a change in the initial timeline that we laid out. If we are successful, as Ms. Gingrich pointed out, by going to the Zoning Board and then ultimately the Conservation Commission, if we're successful there, we'll be making application to the MassWorks program when we are ready to be shovel ready. And last year's schedule required us to be ready for that by the end of the summer, with a decision issued by the MassWorks program the first week in November. We're waiting for specific dates to come out, but I would think that that's a reasonable guideline to follow.
Thank you. I'm all set, Mr. Bendel.
Thank you. Mr. Eden, any comments or questions?
Yes, one of each. So I do have a comment first. I want to say that the inclusion of $250,000 towards the construction of a North Wilmington substation is, I think, a very significant benefit to the town. I know we've been talking about making that a reality for the last several months, and I think that that's a significant step in the right direction to help us accomplish that. My question is probably most appropriately directed towards Ms. Gingrich. I know Attorney Silverstein had said that right now there's a possibility that this development would bring us over the 10% threshold. I was wondering if you could speak to that and whether or not it is a certainty or a probability, or I guess what degree of confidence would this get us above that threshold?
Sure. So now that we are in 2020 and the census is days away, we have better numbers to tell us the numerator and denominator of the equation. So we have building department data that has been used to calculate the total number of households in town. And we have an updated number of affordable units that we got from the state back in the fall. So using those updated numbers and adding those 108 units to those numbers, it does bring us to, I think it's 10.5% with my estimated numbers. So it's still, until we're given our total housing units in town with the census, we have to sort of estimate what that is going to be. And but even using a very, very conservative number, the 108 units brings us well over 10%. By my calculations, we would need somewhere around 60 to 70 units to get over the 10%. So the 108 gives us the 10% plus a little bit of buffer.
Okay, that's what I was looking for. So there's certainly more than one reason to improve or increase our affordable housing inventory, but with the state 40B regulations, I think knowing where we are on that is important. So thank you. That's all for me, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Mr. McCoy, any comments or questions?
Yeah, I'll just make a quick comment. I just want to be consistent. When we were at the Selectmen's meeting relative to the Princeton's properties, I did vote in opposition. I'm not against affordable housing coming into town, but looking at that area in North Wilmington, where I did ask the height of the building would be 4 stories, and I don't believe it's harmonious to the neighborhood in that area. And the closest 4-story building is commercial zone down off of Ballaville Street. And I do share Ms. Ginrich's concerns, and there's always that possibility that we may not be exactly over 10.0 when it comes to affordable housing until the census are to come in 100%. So there's always that question, but I can understand that we're making the approach, but I just wanted to bring those items up. And obviously on the other side of the tracks, we're talking about a substation that we talked about for years. And I think people need to realize in North Wilmington, that's going to be one of the most heavily developed sections of the community. And we're going to see that. That's going to happen. And that was the reason why I was not opposed to affordable housing. If they could maybe reduce it from 4 floors a little bit. I did ask that question. The gentleman said he couldn't do it for economic reasons. And I respect that. I hope he respects the way I voted as well. And I just wish everyone the best. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mrs. O'Mahony?
Sure. And echoing kind of what Selectman Eaton had said, I was happy to see that the donation that was included for the substation. I think this is a great way to try to meet the needs that we have, that we're faced. It's a lot better than some of the other options that, you know, might be considered by private developers at this point to put in a much larger development somewhere else. And I appreciate it. Again, it looks like, you know, Princeton, Mr. Chabon's doing the lion's share of the work. At this point, we're just basically telling him it's okay to go forward with that task. So I support giving him the opportunity to get it through all the different hoops that he now has to get it through.
Thank you. And I just add my 2 cents. I too, as I mentioned, am very supportive of the project all right along. I think this is a great opportunity to add more affordable housing in our community and really work with a developer and have some say for the community, unlike what potentially could happen to us where we have no say in what happens in a project. And we've been fortunate to work with Mr. Shabon and his team, and I think they've been very reasonable. And we did have some tough negotiations, and I want to applaud Mr. Hull on his job. He did negotiating, and specifically the donation for the sub fire station. $250,000 is a lot of money, so we're really excited about that, and I want to compliment everybody who was involved. So with that, Mr. Hull, do you want to add what you may be looking for from the board here tonight?
Yes, I guess before I do that, I think it's important to reiterate 2 points. One being that as of our current situation, you'll recall with the loss of some units from a state group housing program, we have officially fallen below 10%. So the town is currently vulnerable to a less friendly 40B, so to speak. So I think it's important to be able to at least shepherd a process through in a process that we are able to, with a developer we're able to work with, versus being out there and potentially subject to someone that comes in and essentially dictates what they're going to develop and the number of units they're going to develop. One point. The second point is that from a timing perspective, to further delay this, I think is just going to create additional challenges for Princeton Properties. And I would point out that these votes this evening are only to move the process to the next level, which is to DHCD. They'll have to issue a eligibility letter, and then if that takes place, then the project comes back to the town where it is reviewed extensively by the Zoning Board of Appeals. There'll be opportunities for the Zoning Board of Appeals to ask very specific and directed questions. The information that the Princeton property people bring forward. Per the development agreement, there's opportunities for the ZBA to have those documents peer reviewed. So it will be a pretty extensive process, and similarly on the conservation side. So I think those points are noteworthy. With respect to the motions that I believe that the board should consider this evening, the first motion would be to approve and execute the Princeton Wilmington Local Initiative Project Memorandum of Agreement between Princeton Development LLC and the town of Wilmington to establish the terms and conditions for a 108-unit affordable housing development on Jefferson Road as described in detail in the MOA.
Okay, if there's no objection, I'd like to take the agenda out of order as we're on this topic. I'd like to take up items number 6 and 7, which are under board to consider regarding this issue. If there's any, is there any objection to that?
No.
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 Okay, hearing none. We'll take up number 6, Mr. Hall, which is what you just described.
I'll make a motion. Selectman O'Mahony, I'll make a motion to authorize the chairman to execute the local initiative program application for the development of 108 rental units at the corner of Middlesex Avenue and Jefferson Road.
Second, Selectman Eden, second.
Okay, thank you both. We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Okay, hearing none, I'll call for the vote via roll call. Mr. Bendel, yes. Mr. Kyra?
Yes.
Mr. Eaton?
Yes.
Mr. McCoy?
No.
Mrs. O'Mahony?
Yes.
Motion passes 4-1. Thank you. And Mr. Hall, item number 7, if you don't mind reading off the desired motion.
Yes, in this case, the motion would be to authorize Chairman Bendel to sign the local initiative program application, which will be submitted to the State Department of Housing and Community Development in pursuit of a project eligibility letter.
Okay, is there a motion?
Selectman Eden will make that motion.
I was going to say, Mr. Chair, just as a point of order, I think I read number 6 as my last motion. So I actually think we just voted to authorize you to sign it before we voted to execute it. So I apologize, but I just wanted to make sure that the record was clear that I read number 6, which was to authorize you to sign it on our behalf. So I probably did that out of order.
Okay, so it sounds like we need to take up the other issue. If there's no objections, it sounds like it slipped past me too, so no apology needed.
I was just rereading it and I'm like, I know I said chairman in there somewhere.
So how do you want to proceed? Do you want to just take up this next one? What do you want to?
Jonathan, what do you recommend?
You could, you might want to amend your motion to include both of them if you want, just to be clear.
It's probably the easiest.
Is that okay? Oh, Jonathan's on mute.
What?
Attorney Silverstein needs to be unmuted.
Oh, all right.
John, can we unmute? There he is.
All right. My wife wishes she had that button.
Right.
So what I heard in the prior motion was to authorize the chair to sign the memorandum of agreement. I believe this motion is to authorize the chair to sign the approval of the LIP agreement, the LIP application to the state. So they're two different things. I think the approval of the MOA was implied and included within the approval of having the chair sign the MOA. So I think the memorandum of agreement is all set. I think this motion just deals with authorizing Mr. Bendel to sign the approval of the application.
Okay, I just asked to reread your motion.
Just to be clear, the first motion, each of the board members, at least those that were in support of the development, would need to sign the memorandum of agreement. So if it was read as Selectman O'Mahony referenced to authorize the chair to sign it, it would be expected or recommended that those members in favor of the memorandum of agreement all execute it.
Okay, but if I could just ask the maker of the motion to repeat, just so we can get back on track here, this current motion, if you don't mind.
You gonna do it again, Jonathan, or do you want me to do it this time? Like mini.
Yeah, go for it.
So I guess I move to execute the Princeton Wilmington Local Initiative Project Memorandum of Agreement between Princeton Development LLC and the town of Wilmington.
Selectman Eaton seconds.
Okay, the motion's been made and seconded. Is there any discussion? Mr. Kyra,
Yes.
Mr. Eaton,
Yes.
Mr. McCoy,
No,
Mrs. O'Mahony.
Yes.
Motion passes 4-1. And as Mr. Hall mentioned, we will need to sign these documents, so we will be doing so by visiting the police station. Is that correct?
Yes, the documents will be tomorrow brought to the Public Safety Building, and members can sign them there.
Okay, great. With that, that concludes this discussion. I want to thank Mr. Shaban. I want to wish you well as you move forward through what will be a very public process. We wish you well, and I hope you'll stay safe.
Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman and members. Really appreciate it.
Mr. Silver.
Mr. Chair. Sorry, I don't think the board has yet taken a vote to authorize the chair to execute the LIP application to the state.
So that was the first vote. That's why I said I did it out of order, because the first motion that I read was to authorize the chairman to sign it. And then the second motion was to authorize the execution of it.
I thought I heard your motion as authorizing the chair to sign the memorandum of agreement, so I could be mistaken.
No, I believe you're right, Jonathan. It was the memorandum of agreement was the first one.
To authorize the chairman to execute.
I think it would be advisable, just belt and suspenders, so to speak, if we could just replay the second one, so to speak, to authorize the chair to sign the LIP application. You'll recall the board approved agreed to support the LIP agreement on the 13th. This is just authorizing the chair to sign it.
Jonathan, are you suggesting that we revote?
I could be wrong. I think what I've heard is 2 votes with respect to the memorandum of agreement. I haven't yet heard a motion to approve execution of the LIP application, which goes to the state, separate from the agreement between the town and Princeton. So just to be 100% sure, I would recommend that a motion be made to authorize you as chair to sign the local initiative project application.
Okay, I will make a motion. Selectman Eaton will make a motion to authorize the chairman to execute the local initiative program application for the development of 108 rental units at the corner of Middlesex Avenue and Jefferson Road.
Selectman Kyra, I'll second it.
Okay, thank you, gentlemen. Motion been made. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, I'll call for the vote. Mr. Bendel, yes. Mr. Kyra,
Yes.
Mr. Eaton,
Yes.
McCoy,
I'll just be consistent, no.
Mrs. O'Mahony.
Yes.
That motion passes 4-1, just to be safe. I told you folks we'd hit some bumps in the roads here on our first remote meeting, and we have. So, I thank you all very much for that discussion. Valerie, thank you for being with us.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll get back on track with the agenda. And at this time, Mr. Hull, we'll move on to communications, please.
Actually, before we get to communications, we do have one more appointment. I had suggested that it would be advisable to ask Shelley Newhouse, Health Director, and Bill Kavanaugh, Fire Chief, to offer an update on where we are locally with respect to COVID-19. Yeah.
Shelley, thank you for being here.
Hi, everybody.
Hey, Shirley.
Chief Kavanaugh got called to an emergency call. He just let me know that he had to run out, so he won't be on the meeting.
Okay.
I've had a busy, long weekend. I posted an update earlier today. I had 17 positives in Wilmington and 16 quarantines, but during this meeting, I just got another positive, so we're up to 18. So that's 18 positives and 16 in quarantine. I have no one that is been released from being a positive yet. So it hasn't been there 2 weeks yet. So that will be hopefully towards the end of this week. In the beginning of next week, we'll start releasing some people out of isolation and quarantine, but they have to be asymptomatic. So we're just monitoring their symptoms. And it's important to still social distance yourself. I'm getting lots of complaints about people in Market Basket and just other places where there's a lot of people. And, you know, I can't be the social distancing police. So I'm asking people to just please try to do it themselves and keep those tips in mind to social distance yourself as much as possible.
Absolutely. Thank you, Shelley. How, if people are looking for information, I know you're doing a great job updating Facebook. We also have putting out the information on the website. I think our IT director has been sending out tweets. So that way, and also WCTV has been very helpful in putting out information. Is that how people should be finding out the most recent information from your office?
Yes, for definitely for the town of Wilmington. You can just keep track on my Facebook page and on the Board of Health website. And like you said, the Twitter accounts and in the Apple, the Patch, they update off of my updates.
Great. I really appreciate you doing the best you can to keep people informed. I know you said that Chief Kavanaugh had to step off, but we all really appreciate everything that the police and fire department are doing right now for all the residents. And we're glad that they're fully operational right now and still there. And I know Chief, talking to him earlier, he would want to have said that don't be afraid to call. If you're having trouble, please call 911 and someone will answer that call. No question. So.
Yeah, he really wants to make that known that if you're a sick patient and you're in respiratory distress, don't transport yourself. Please call EMS to do that for you. That's what they're there for. They have the personal protective equipment to do that. So don't put yourself in jeopardy, and exactly that's what they're there for. So don't hesitate to call them.
I'm sure there may be comments or questions, so I'll go down the line, starting with Mr. Kyra.
Shelley, thank you for the update and staying on top of this for us. Just a question in regards to people that test positive. Are they retested before they're allowed to go back out into the community? I'm assuming that they're all quarantined.
Yeah, so when you're positive, you're called what's isolated. So you want to isolate yourself from anyone in your household. And in order to get released back into the community or the workforce, you have to have 2 negative samples taken. So that would be 24 hours apart. So you would need to have 2 negatives 24 hours apart. And that will be reported to the local Board of Health. And then we can send you something like a letter or something releasing you from.
And how do they get tested? Do they go to, does someone come into the home?
No, they'll go back to where they originally got tested.
Okay.
So wherever they got originally tested, they can go back there. They know the date. We're keeping track of the dates. So I give them a shout. I email them or call them and let them know that, hey, how are you feeling? Are you still symptomatic? If they're asymptomatic and have no symptoms, then they would proceed to go get tested.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Eaton?
Yes, Ms. Newhouse, thank you again for all of your hard work on this. I did have a question as to the distinction between positive and quarantine. So if I heard you correctly, there's now 18 positive and 16 that are quarantined. Are the 16 that are quarantined not yet positive, but maybe, or is there an overlap?
Sure. So when you're quarantined, we quarantine people when you become in contact with a positive COVID-19 patient. So that means that you have direct contact with a patient, meaning you were a healthcare worker and you worked on a patient that was positive, or you live in the same household with someone who is positive. So then that means that you're quarantined for 2 weeks. We will ask you to monitor your symptoms, take your temperature, see how you're feeling, if you develop any symptoms. And if that's the case, then you would have to get retested. So a lot of the quarantines that we have are whole families. So we have a large number, but it might be 5 in one household that are all quarantined because one person in the household is a positive.
Mhm.
So because they all have direct contact, then they would be quarantined, or it could be a roommate, or it could be a coworker, something like that.
Okay, and I did have one more question. I noticed very shortly before our meeting started, the town of Billerica announced that they were no longer going to be providing the number of positive cases. And I'm just reading a brief part of their statement. It was the Massachusetts Department of Health is discouraging municipalities from reporting the number of cases. I would just ask if in the future that we end up not reporting the number of positives that we have, that we at least make the announcement that we are going to not do that anymore. I just don't want the absence of an announcement or the absence of information to lead to speculation otherwise. So, I mean, Billerica seems to be doing a very a peculiar way to announce it. They're doing it as a percentage of the population is positive, which really, I mean, I don't want to get into our second conversation about numerators and denominators, but you can certainly do the math and figure out how many positive cases there are if you know the percentage of the population. But I would just ask that if we end up making that transition, that we at least explain why we're doing it. It's not that we're trying to hide information. It's that the state is telling us that they wish that we don't proceed that way.
So last week, the state actually gave out some guidance pertaining to this that said, you know, they didn't want municipalities to put out the number of positives or the number of quarantines that they had in each community, because the state wanted to do it by county. So there was a lot of, local boards of health that weren't happy with that, just for lack of transparency. And I like to get that out there, and everyone kind of felt the same way. They wanted to make that information known. So there was a lot of questions back and forth to the State Department of Public Health. And today I got an email from them because I had asked them, I'd been updating every couple of days, and they were concerned with these people's identities becoming known. So as long as we report just the number, then they're okay with that. And that's what I've been doing. So, you don't want to breach anyone's privacy. So I'll continue to do that. Every few days, just the case numbers.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. McCoy?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to tell Director Newhouse, I think you do an outstanding job, and I'm glad to see that you're informing everybody on what's happening. And I just like to just make a quick comment, if I can, relative to the positives. You're saying there's 18, and I understand HIPAA and privacy. I don't want nobody to know about, if I had surgeries, unless I announced it myself. But is it out of line to find out relative to the 18 positives, no names, neighborhoods, the age of these individuals? I mean, what is the hardship in us knowing, say, ages of individuals relative to the positives? No, like I said, no names, no addresses, nothing, just 18 positive, one's age this, one's age that. Is there an issue with that?
I don't think I would go that far. And I think that would just be, I think I just want to keep it at the numbers of cases, right, just to make sure that I'm following the HIPAA guidelines. I will say that our numbers, our ages haven't been typical to the elderly. We have seen a great number of ages 30 to 45 presenting positive.
Right, I appreciate that, because I know I'm out Market Basket a couple times a week, and obviously some folks want to come up and ask questions because they see us all the time and as members of the board, and some ask me that question, and I just thought this would be an opportune time to ask it. I respect that. Thank you.
Mrs. O'Mahony?
Sure. Just a couple of things, Shelley. Thank you for the update. And I think it is important to note, as you said, you know, even though there's 34 people either testing positive or quarantine, that doesn't mean it's 34 separate households. And I think that's important for people to understand, because I think that's part of kind of the panic of this. Is it infecting whole neighborhoods? Is it and kind of like what Selectman McCoy is asking? But I do understand, you know, just putting HIPAA aside, you know, when social media thinks that they know something, all of a sudden it becomes, you know, like wildfire. You know, like last week, a gentleman from a different town passed away, and I saw it posted by about 20 different people just because I was in 2 different networks that this family was also involved in. And people were concerned that it was multiple people had passed away, and it was really, unfortunately, you know, this one gentleman. And I think we all have to be careful about what information we're relying on. So I do appreciate you pointing out kind of the reliable sources of information that the town should be looking at, and not relying on Facebook posts. Really looking at what you guys are putting out first. Calling you if there's any question. I mean, I assume, you know, if any of these people were in contact with other groups of people, those people are being notified in some manner. So if it's someone that's been in contact with the public in some way, those people are going to be notified and tested as well. You know, you guys are doing your job, and we all need to rely on that and call you if there's any question that we have about any exposure. So I appreciate you probably getting inundated with that. And I also wanted to note, since I don't want you to have to be the social distancing person, you know, we closed the parks and the public places kind of for a reason. And speaking as a parent of 4 children who are a bit stir crazy, you know, meeting in the parking lot at St. Thomas is the same thing as meeting in the parking lot at a park. So don't do it, you know. And I'm guilty. I know my kids are probably getting away with it when they say they want to go for a ride. I don't know where they're really going sometimes, but you know, unfortunately now is the time that we have to be kind of the strict, unfun parents and making sure that we're keeping them as close to home as we can at all times. And just a reminder that even if it's a private parking lot, it still counts as contact. So there's no loopholes for this one, unfortunately. So thank you for all your hard work.
Social distancing doesn't mean, you know, going to visit people. It means social distancing, going for walks by yourself or just with, you know, 1 or 2 other people. It's just so important right now. I think that we're going to see a surge in the next 2 weeks before we start to see a downturn, I'm hoping. I mean, I don't know how long the surge will last, but I think with all this uptick in testing, we're definitely going to see a huge surge in positives.
Mr. Bendo, I have another question, if I could.
Sure.
Just a question for Shelley. Shelley, just in a follow-up, for procedure-wise, when someone is tested positive or is quarantined, what would you typically do? Would you contact people that they came in contact with, just so that, you know, how are you doing that? Is that?
Yep. So that's called contact tracing. So when we get a positive patient, we go back and we do what's called contact tracing. We find out who they have direct contact with, and that means, you know, their coworkers or they're in their household. And then anyone that they spent time with less than 6 feet apart for greater than 15 minutes. So typically that could be like a roommate or a coworker, things like that. So we trace back and then we let them know. And if they're in Wilmington, we follow them. If they're in another town, we get in touch with the other town. It's all done through an electronic reporting system called Maven that's run by the state. So all that's inputted in there, and we have just a huge event list that we keep track of. And I have a spreadsheet of, you know, this person's quarantined till April 2nd, this one's quarantined till April 13th, this one is quarantined till, you know, March 30th. And we just go down the list and call every single day and see how everyone's doing.
Great. It's good. It's good to know that you know, people are aware of the contact, you know, so that there's not any question out there.
It's not a good phone call to make when I say, hi, it's Shelley from the Board of Health in Wilmington. And they're like, oh, no.
Well,
Thank
Shelley,
you.
thank you very much. We really appreciate it. I know you're working around the clock and your office is doing a fantastic job.
They are.
Equally as important as, social distancing and washing our hands and personal hygiene is staying informed with accurate information. And that's what you're doing, is providing us with accurate information. So we really appreciate that. Again, I'll mention the police and fire have been fantastic. They're out there servicing the residents. I hear them answering the call on the scanner every day. And Mr. Hull, maybe you can just chime in here too, but I want to add that our Veteran Services Office is still up and running if anybody needs help. Our Substance Abuse Coordinator is available if people are struggling during this time. So the town is still functional. We're still operating, although a lot of it's remotely. But Shelley's office and others are still available. Do you want to speak to that, Jeff?
Yes, that's a good point. There's no question that Lou and Mike at the Veterans Services and Patty are still available for calls and are, to the extent they can, processing requests for benefits online, assisting individuals as needed. Also, the Elderly Services, Terry Marciello and her staff continue to provide meals to elders who are confined for various reasons to their homes. In fact, there's been some donations from local businesses here of late, which it just goes to show, not surprisingly, Wilmington businesses stepping up. AJ's, for example, over the weekend on Saturday, put together 67 breakfast sandwiches that Terry and her staff delivered to some elders. Lucci's made a donation of hot commodity toilet paper, believe it or not. And so that's been incorporated into the care packages that Terry is putting together for seniors. So they're continuing to operate, certainly not as they normally would, but to the extent they can, and reach out to seniors, check in, make sure folks are getting contact. With respect to the town offices, we are continuing to take calls. It's on a bit of a skeletal arrangement right now. Tuesdays and Fridays, we have staff in the office to process payroll, process vendor checks, but certainly take calls as well. Also, as you know, there's the tax collector's office is receiving collections for motor vehicle excise, and property tax will be another item. So we're continuing to operate on a limited basis.
Great. Thank you very much. And thanks to all the departments, police, fire, DPW, everybody. And Shelley, thanks so much. We won't keep you. We know you have a really important job to go do. So thanks for being with us tonight. We really, please stay safe yourself. Okay.
All right, I got this guy. One of my patients needs.
And so we'll move on to communications, Mr. Hull, please.
Yes, so under communications, the board received an email recently from the Alcohol Beverage Control Commission noting that on March 15th, with the governor's issuance of an order prohibiting the gathering of more than 25 people in on-premises consumption of food and drink in light of COVID-19, effective as of 12 a.m. on Tuesday, March 17th, all on-premises consumption licenses are prohibited from selling alcohol to the public until 11:59 p.m. on April 5th. This includes restaurants, bars, clubs. We'll see if that period is extended, but that is the communication for now.
Thank you.
Next, we have correspondence from John O'Neill. This is a follow-up to an issue that was raised a few weeks ago with regard to RMLD. You'll recall they had a ransomware attack, and he notes in here, Town Manager Hull asked for me to follow up with the Reading Municipal Light Department to discuss the ransomware incident that occurred on Friday, February 21 of this calendar year. I participated in a conference call with RMLD's IT personnel on Friday, March 20th to discuss the matter and to get an understanding of what took place. While the intent of the memo is to provide the board with details of what took place, I thank you for understanding that this communication will be limited to generalities. RMLD's IT department first became aware of the incident when they began receiving calls that personnel were unable to access local files and file shares on their network. The IT department quickly recognized the signs of ransomware. They began taking the recommended first steps when these types of events occur, physically disconnecting computers and servers from the network to isolate and minimize the scope of the infection. The IT department's next step was to make arrangements to bring third-party assistance in. RMLD contacted a local FBI office. The FBI was unable to provide direct help, but logged the incident. RMLD then hired a third-party company to consult on the matter, assist in making sure the systems were brought back online, were clean of ransomware, and to help identify how the breach took place. While malware and ransomware can never be completely prevented, RMLD is taking steps to reduce the risks of having future incidents. These steps include enforcing stricter security measures for outside vendors, service accounts, and cloud services, updating their incident response plan, and receiving their reviewing their internal IT policy. There will still be some pieces of third-party investigation taking place as of last week, but RMLD is confident that no customer data was exposed or retrieved by the attackers.
Thank you, Mr. Hull. I just want to mention too that if any members have any comments or questions about these correspondence, these 6 correspondence, feel free to jump in.
Then next is a correspondence from Tina Conway. This is with regard to the impact on the last date of registered vote. So as you'll recall from the earlier discussion, the April 25th election date is being rescheduled. So initially, based upon that date, the last date of registered vote was April 6th. As of with Chapter 45 of the Acts of 2020, it was approved by the legislature and signed by the governor. Now the voter deadline will be 10 days before the new election. So once a date is determined for the local elections, voters will be allowed to register up to 10 days prior to that election date. Next is just a notation about an agreement, a grant actually that Shelley, new health director, was able to obtain from the state. This is the Mass Department of Public Health. It's being administered through the Metropolitan Area Planning Council. It's a grant for $5,000 to offset some of the costs associated with COVID-19. And we have correspondence on a lighter note, I guess, from Xfinity, noting that they are deferring the change of their cartoon network to the digital preferred tier. I can only imagine they've done that in light of the fact that there's a lot of kids home and they don't want to be the spoiler.
Me too.
Next under correspondence is information received from the State Lottery Commission. And it's just noting that the Golden Ginger has applied for a Keno license. Correspondence was received on March 16th. The town has 21 days from receipt of this notice to voice any objections, and a hearing would be held. There have been, as you recall, similar instances where different restaurants and other businesses have applied for these Keno licenses. So the board, if you choose no action, then it would be approved, or if there's an objection, a hearing would be scheduled I've consulted with Chief Desmond. He has no objections.
Thank you. Before we move to board to consider, we have 4 board to consider items. We did, if you're just joining us, already pass items number 6 and 7. They were 4-1 in favor. Both of those board to considers already passed, which will bring to item 8.
Yes, so the item number 8 is designating Fire Chief William Kavanaugh to serve as the designee for purposes of complying with Mass General Law, Chapter 39, Section 20A. So as part of the process that was described earlier, where the town meeting was recessed and continued to May 30th. One of the provisions within that law requires that the Board of Selectmen establish a public safety official to convey this information to the Attorney General's office. And based upon the fact that Mr. Kavanaugh is the town's emergency management director, it would be my recommendation that the board vote to authorize Fire Chief Kavanaugh to serve in that role.
Okay, would anybody like to offer a motion?
Selectman Eaton will make that motion.
Selectman O'Mahony will second it.
Thank you both. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, we'll call for the vote. Mr. Bendel, yes. Mr. Kyra?
Yes.
Mr. Eaton?
Yes.
Mr. McCoy?
Yes.
Mrs. O'Mahony?
Yes.
That is unanimous. Thank you very much.
Next under board to consider is a request. It was made, I guess about a month ago at this point, but it's from Joe Martinello requesting to conduct a road race on May 2nd of 2021 to raise funds for a group called Roots, which is a local group that is, their mission is educating and empowering our community on the prevention of substance abuse. So this would be, if authorized, the regular standard route that the 5Ks have been doing, starting at the Common, going to Wildwood, Federal, Concord Street, and then back to the Common.
Is there a motion?
Selectman Eaton will make that motion.
Selectman Kyra will second.
Thank you both. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, we'll call for the vote. Mr. Bendel, yes. Mr. Kyra?
Yes.
Mr. Eaton?
Yes.
Mr. McCoy?
Yes.
Mrs. O'Mahony?
Yes.
It's unanimous. Thank you.
Next is correspondence from Lou Samaglia, the Department of Veterans Services Director. Department of Veterans Services requests the permission of the Board of Selectmen to have our annual Memorial Day Parade on Monday, May 25th, 2020, and invite you and the entire Board of Selectmen to participate in remembering and honoring our departed comrades on Memorial Day. Our parade will assemble at Market Basket Parking Lot, Main Street at 09:30 a.m. with step-off time being 10 a.m. sharp. We would also like to take the opportunity to invite you to participate in the memorial service to be held at the Wildwood Cemetery after the parade starting at 1100.
Okay, is there a motion?
Joe Marie O'Mahony will make the motion.
Selectman Kyra will second it.
Thank you both. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, we'll call for the vote. Mr. Bendel is a yes. Mr. Kyra?
Yes.
Mr. Eaton?
Yes.
Mr. McCoy?
Yes.
Mrs. O'Mahony?
Yes.
It's unanimous. Thank you.
Next under board to consider, there's 2 items that are related. One being the renewal of a taxi cab license for Wilmington Taxi. And then separate from that, would be a separate vote, would be renewal of the taxi cab operator's license, which is Timothy J. Flynn. So taking them up one at a time, the first would be the renewal of the taxi license for Wilmington Taxi.
Anybody-
I'll make that motion.
Thank you.
Selectman Kyra, I'll second it.
Thank you both. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, call for the vote. Mr. Bendel is a yes. Mr. Kyra,
Yes,
Reeton,
Yes.
McCoy,
Yes.
Mrs. O'Mahony.
Yes.
It's unanimous.
And then the final board to consider renewal of the taxi cab operator's license for Timothy J. Flynn. Again, this has been reviewed by Chief Desmond, and there's no questions here. I would just note on this one, whereas the prior license, the board will be asked to sign and it'll be made available at the Public Safety Building. This permit for the individual, Mr. Flynn, historically, the board has designated me as your agent to sign the permit for the taxi cab drivers.
Is there a motion?
Selectman Kyra, I'll make that motion.
Rick Meaton, second.
Thank you both. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, we'll call for the vote. Mr. Bendel is a yes. Mr. Kyra,
Yes,
Mr. Eaton,
Yes.
Mr. McCoy,
Yes.
Mrs. O'Mahony.
Yes.
It is unanimous. Thank you. Okay, that brings us to public comment. And before we begin, I just want to remind folks, if you'd like to call in, we have a number flashing at the bottom of the screen on WCTV. Just in case you're listening at home, the number is 1-646-558-8656, and using the ID number 785-350-874. And then you'll need to hit pound twice to get a hold of us. And our IT director, John O'Neill, has indicated that we do have one caller on the line. Is that correct? Caller, if you are there, if you don't mind introducing yourself, your name and address, please.
Yes, this is Lou Samaglia, Director of Veteran Services. How's everybody doing today?
Excellent.
It was good, Lou.
Nice to see you. I'm glad this is working out pretty good. First off, thank you for approving our plans for Memorial Day. Hopefully by then things will be back to normal. I know it's been a trying time for all. I just want to let everybody know that, like has been mentioned, our office is totally operational. We have been working remotely with the VA, with our contacts at JFK. They are also working remotely, but we have the ability to do everything we usually do. And that is to include help out with some bucket basket cars and things like that. But I just also want to say thank you, Mr. Chairman. In the world that we roll in veterans, leadership means everything, chain of command. And with yourself, and I have to mention Selectman Eaton too, you guys both have been great getting information out through social media. I've been getting a lot of phone calls, and they seem to know that what's going on is not anybody's particular fault, and it's all how you handle a situation. And I believe you gentlemen and your whole board there, and Jeff and his staff are doing a wonderful job. So just 978-694-2040. That is the office phone number for the Veteran Services, and veterans@wilmingtonma.gov. You can get a hold of Mike or myself, and Patty's been busy with the senior center doing the meals. So we're working. I appreciate everybody that's been doing everything that they have been doing. And the town and the people should be proud of this town. I've said it a million times every time I speak. I'm proud of Wilmington for so many reasons. And this one here is the way we're handling this situation is just another reason.
Well, Lou, we really appreciate your kind words, and we appreciate all you're doing to continue to service the town of Wilmington. I think I said at the last meeting, I think it's worth repeating that we all know someone like yourself who went off to war to help protect our freedoms. The least we can do is stay home and keep our families safe and keep other people safe. So we really appreciate all that you're doing, and our best wishes to you, Marion, and your family as well.
I appreciate that, Mr. Chairman. Also, people like myself and our family, and I believe many families, we're enjoying, this is like found family time. And it's kind of making everybody realize that, you know, life goes by pretty quick and there's no reason to sweat the small things. So enjoy this week, 2 weeks, month, whatever it turns out to be with your family. I'm blessed and I'm really enjoying this extra family time.
As you should. Lou, thanks so much. Appreciate you calling, and please stay safe.
You too, and thank you all for doing everything, man. Thanks.
All right. It looks like we have another caller on the line. Caller number 2. If you could.
Hello.
Hello, caller. Good evening.
Good evening. This is Kevin McDonald. Good evening. I have a few comments I'd like to make and some questions. This first one's for Mr. Hull. Mr. Hull, our public safety officials often go to calls and they have to perform CPR. In the light of the COVID-19 crisis, can you tell us if the town has provided the emergency response workers with any type of devices that they could put in the mouths of those that they're performing CPR on?
I can tell you that I've been in touch on a regular basis with the both chiefs, and they are providing the staff with the appropriate equipment. I can't speak to the specific issue, but I believe Mr. Kavanaugh certainly could if you wish to follow up with him separately.
Is he in the meeting?
He is. Chief Kavanaugh?
Good evening. Mr. McDonald, what was your specific question again, sir?
Chief, thanks for taking my question. My question and my concern is, oftentimes our EMTs respond to emergencies where they have to perform CPR. And it's my understanding that there is equipment that can be put in a person's mouth so that there's not mouth-to-mouth contact. In light of the COVID-19 crisis, is your department provided with that equipment?
Yes, Mr. McDonald, for healthcare provider CPR for the last number of years, there is no actual mouth-to-mouth contact between the rescuer and the victim. We use a mask, it's called a bag valve mask, which has a separate outlet that also pushes the air away from the responder. So both the PD and the FD and the paramedics are equipped with all of this this stuff to make sure that they're not getting in contact with any sort of exhalation of germs from a victim.
Okay, I'm very happy to hear that. My other concern was Shelley Newhouse is on earlier, and she mentioned that there were 18 positive people that tested for COVID-19. I'm not sure if it's COVID-19 or if it's the coronavirus in general. Can you identify if it was COVID-19 or if it was just in general the coronavirus, the other strains?
Is that directed towards me?
Yeah, if you could answer that, Chief, I appreciate that.
We are the Board of Health is being notified of COVID-19 positives.
Okay, thank you, Chief.
Okay, I'm just kind of curious why we have 18 positives and only 16 that are quarantined. How come all 18 aren't quarantined?
I believe so.
So the 16 are in addition to the 18.
And can you tell us if the HIPAA laws are still in place when there's a state of emergency, and how is it possible that a pandemic like this is expected to be controlled if people that are quarantined, for example, whole families are quarantined and they need groceries or they need specific needs? How can they be quarantined unless there's some type of program that the town has in place so that they could have groceries brought to them, necessities brought to them? And if there is a program in place, is there personal protective equipment to those people that are providing those necessities?
So what I can tell you is that Shelley is in direct contact with, not direct physical contact, but phone contact with all these people. A lot of them are utilizing the Peapod type services for groceries and necessities. Over the weekend, one of them said they don't have a thermometer. They need something. Shelley contacted me. We had one. I got it through Kim My Tech, and I dropped it on their front door. They knew I was there. They didn't come outside. I placed on their door, never came in contact with them, didn't touch their property. And then I walked away, washed my hands, and that was the end of that. So even if we are supplying help to them as far as groceries or medication, necessities, anything they might need, we're doing so without actually coming in contact with any of them. We're leaving it on their doorstep. They open their garage. We leave it, right inside the garage door so they can get it. And then we walk away. That's the end of our contact with them.
Okay, maybe Mr. Hull can address this issue. Mr. Hull, can you tell us if there's a program in place so that people who are quarantined are there's some type of control measure so that when they're being provided with their needs, such as groceries and necessities, that somebody is in charge of that so that they're not going to the grocery store and infecting, 1,000 other people?
I think the chief just answered that they were getting groceries delivered, and if they needed some type of supplies, the chief just described an example, and I think that's the protocol that I'm pretty confident that Shelley has those protocols in place, and I appreciate.
Who's in charge? Who's in charge of that, Mr. Bendel?
Well, we have a team, and it's working closely with our Board of Health.
Okay, and the last question that I have is for the town manager. Mr. Hull, does the town pay unemployment insurance? And if it does, is there any type of plan in place where the town is considering laying off workers that are not working now so that the amounts of money that we've been paying into unemployment insurance, the insurance company takes over the payment for those people rather than it coming out of our treasury?
The town does not pay unemployment insurance. The employer has two options. One is to pay into the unemployment system. The other is to more or less it's a pay-as-you-go. So as individuals are identified as being unemployed, we're contacted by the unemployment office, and there's an amount that we have to pay based upon the number of weeks they're unemployed. So we do not pay unemployment insurance.
Okay. Thank you very much. Do we have any indication if we have any other callers on the line?
We do not have any other callers.
Okay, that wasn't. All right. We move into announcements is the next. Thank you, Chief, for that input there and answering those questions. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Absolutely. Sorry I had to take off so quick.
Totally understandable. We appreciate what you're doing, and please stay safe. We're going to move into announcements next, and I'll just kick it off by saying I'm just so impressed by how the community responded to this pandemic, and from residents to businesses, and everyone's doing their part. And there's been so many examples, but I just want to give a quick shout out to Christina Bentley. She set up that Wilmington Cares program, and they've just been delivering gifts to so many worthy people, and it's just been awesome. And she's just one example. I know there was a bear hunt today that took place in the community, and just got a message before we came on air that there's a nurse trying to set up an event where everybody lights up a candle in their window on April 1st. And there's just been so many acts of kindness and donations, and it could go on and on. I'm sure I'm missing some, but I wanted to just point out those couple under announcements that have just been so impressed how this community has come together without physically actually coming together. And it's been really impressive, and hope it will continue. And we just want to continue to make sure everybody stays safe. So shout out to those few people. Anybody else have an I'll go down the line? Again, Mr. Kyra.
I'm all set, thank you.
Mr. Eaton.
No, thank you.
McCoy.
I'm all set, Mr. Chairman.
Mrs. O'Mahony.
Good. I just miss you guys. I hope we're in room 9 again soon, because this is weird.
Thank you.
I miss you too.
I know you do, Mike.
No, I do. I love your brother next door, and I love you too.
Stay 6 feet, at least 6 feet away for a little while.
Okay. Make sure you tell your brother that, okay?
I'm sure he's watching.
Thank you very much. That's got to be the first time anyone's ever said they've missed the Board of Selectmen. So.
No, it's weird. I miss not being in the same room as you guys.
Well, I appreciate you guys bearing with me here. First remote meeting. Okay, we'll move on to new business. Move down the line. I have no new business, Mr. Kyra.
No, I have no new business other than, looking at the screen, I can't help but think about the Brady Bunch theme. We can all start singing it. I don't know, there's a few of us that remember that show. We start turning to each other and looking up and down.
This is quite the crew.
Yeah.
I'm changing it. For the last part, I'm changing it. I'm on an island.
Oh, that looks good.
Brady's go to Hawaii.
Mr. Eaton, I don't know if you can top that, but I'll go to you next.
Come on, Jonathan.
I'm not even going to attempt to. So next.
I'll change it back.
Mr. McCoy?
Well, just to touch upon what Mr. Kyra said, I kind of wrote a song prior to about the Brady Bunch. There was a, happy 4 members on the Board of Selectmen, but I won't finish it.
I look forward to that. Mrs. Omar.
Sure. There was just one thing. I'm sure there's going to be a letter to follow at some point, but people might have been seeing that the WOW road race on April 26th. It's no surprise that that's becoming a virtual road race. So there's not going to be any in-person event. We're not going to try to continue it out. It is our final race. So just be on the lookout if you want to participate. We're still, going to do it. I've already done it twice. I've committed to doing it all 10 times for all 10 years, all 10 times we've had it between now and April 26th. But I did want to make sure you guys were aware and the town was aware that we're not going to be doing it in person or trying to reschedule. It is going to be a virtual 5K.
I think you're leading the charge on that. I was impressed to see you out there. Lead.
I wouldn't say impressed, but
Was.
Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Hall, I know most calendars have made their way through the shredder, but we do have some important dates that we're going to try to plan for.
Yes, so the brush drop off, Old Main Street, 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. On April 4th. Then April 6th through the 10th is curbside collection of yard waste. Another brush drop off on April 8th, 8 a.m. to 2 p.m. Again on the 11th, 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. A Board of Selectmen's meeting for the 13th of April. We say room 9, we'll see what happens. I think that might be optimistic, but maybe we should be optimistic. Brush drop off on the 15th of April, Old Main Street, 8 a.m. to 2 p.m. Again on the 18th, 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. April 20th, town offices are closed for Patriots Day. Then again, April 21st to the 25th, another curbside collection of yard waste. The 22nd of April, another brush drop off, Old Main Street, 8 a.m. to 2 p.m. Again on the 25th, 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. A Selectmen's meeting scheduled for April 27th. And then of May 4th to the 8th is a curbside collection of yard waste. We have May 12th is currently slated to be the rescheduled Finance Committee Planning Board joint public hearing relative to the warrant for the annual town meeting. It's currently slated for Town Hall Auditorium. May 30th, the annual town meeting, High School Auditorium, 10:30 a.m. Obviously, all these dates are subject to change depending upon where we are in the curve.
Thank you very much. Before we go to the roll call for adjournment, I just want to extend well wishes to all of you and your families. Continue to please be safe. And to everybody out there, let's continue to practice social distancing. Listen to reliable sources like our health director, Ms. Newhouse, and let's all do our part to make sure we get through this together. So wishing everybody well, and I hope everybody will be safe. Special thanks to John O'Neill, our IT director and WCTV, for helping us put this together, and to Beverly for taking the minutes, and to Jeff for arranging it. Okay, folks, thank you all. With that, I'll call for a motion to adjourn. Is there one?
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second, Mr. Chair.
And we'll go down the line. Mr. Bendel is a yes. Mr. Kyra?
Yes.
Mr. Eaton?
Yes.
Mr. McCoy?
Yes.
Mrs. O'Mahony.
Yes.
It is unanimous. Good night, everyone. Please be safe.
Good night.